Hi, so this video is about glazing. Glazing is a technique where you put a thin layer of paint that's actually mostly medium, and this is a very small amount of paint, over top of your painting that you've already begun. And what it has the result is it has the effect of adding a lot of richness to your painting. It makes the colors have greater depth. It has them have more sophisticated and subtle modulation of color within it. And it allows you to unify the painting across the whole surface. If your painting feels jumpy, it makes it so it feels very smooth and even. And I'm going to show you how this process works. Picture this bottom area as the surface of your canvas. And this on top is the paint. And what this paint is basically is it's a bunch of suspended particles that are suspended in a polymer fluid. And when that fluid dries, those particles kind of sink and bind together. So that's your paint layer on top of it. A glaze layer is just a paint layer that's had medium added to it. So those particles are spread farther apart. So if I were to draw this, here you see the particles really densely together. The glaze layer on top, the particles are much farther apart. So this is the glaze layer on top. So when this dries, what happens is the light can go through this glaze layer and into the layer below, and in fact can begin to bounce around in there. And it gives it a distinct luminosity to it. So you can still see the underlying color, but it's just been slightly modified by the glaze. Here's just a picture of a student work. Student very much like you guys. And she had this massive expanse of blue sky in here. And it was just a couple colors, mostly blue, sliding down. And she was able to get a lot of richness to it by adding in additional colors such as reds and yellows. And they're there, but they're very thin paint. So that you can see right through to it. It still feels like blue, but it's been modified slightly. So that's got that richness and depth that I talked about. So here's what you need to know to glaze. First thing you need is paint, and paint that is transparent often works much better for a glaze layer. And usually the paints are marked on the back of their level of transparency. I usually restrict my glazing to transparent or semi-transparent paints. Second thing you're going to need is acrylic glazing liquid, and that's what I have here. You can use water, but it doesn't have the same luster and same luminosity as glazing liquid does. And it doesn't give you as long a drying time. Oftentimes when a glaze layer is wet, I like to manipulate it and wipe some areas off or add to other areas. So what you're going to want to do is mix up mostly glaze liquid with only a little bit of paint in it. So I've got a couple different colors here, and I've got a remainder of a student work left over from last term that was kind of abandoned in the studio. So I'm going to try and get additional richness to this paint by adding glazing liquid. Now you'll see the glazing liquid comes out as kind of an opaque white, but when it dries it will be clear. So I tend to use about 80% glazing liquid to 20% color. But once again, that amount depends on how much coverage you want. Do you really want to cover up the background colors, or do you just want to slightly tint it? So I've got kind of a purple mixed up here. And now I'm going to come in here and paint over some of the areas. You can see how the underlying paint remains. You can still see what's going on there underneath, but now it's just slightly modified. You do lose the brush marks a little bit when you're glazing, and that can be a good or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for. What you can see is I'm selectively adding the glaze here, which is technically called scrumbling. You can also cover the entire surface with your glaze to get an overall feel to it. I tend to use colors that are already on the canvas. So I usually don't try to introduce a radically different color. Oftentimes if you add like a complementary color, you'll end up really mudding the color significantly. And you'll find that you've got a painting that's gone very, very dull on you. This background, I'm adding a little bit of yellow to the same red that I've used in the glaze to get a similar feel to it. Okay, also when I'm glazing, I can also manipulate how much glaze is on there. If you're using glazing liquid, it stays wet. So you can actually remove some of the glaze if you feel like you've got too much in a certain area, or if you want a little bit more control. So I'm just using a paper towel to pull off some of the paint that I put on there to make the glaze a little bit more subtle. So you may find it difficult the first time you do glazing to paint over a painting you've already spent a lot of time working on and that you're pretty happy with. But once you get used to the fact that you're just adding a really thin layer of paint that only slightly modifies the color and has the effect of adding richness to it, you'll find it's a really, really useful technique. One of the problems with glazing is it tends to knock down the highlights as well as the shadows, and it makes the whole painting slightly duller. And a lot of artists counter this by doing a glaze layer, then going back in, popping the highlights up again, getting them as strong and as saturated, as well as going back into the darks. So they have the richness that they get with glazing, while still having the strong lights and darks and the strong saturation of fresh paint that has that immediacy to it. But it's an important tool in your tool chest, and I really encourage you to be brave, try it, try to glaze over a painting you already have and see the richness comes out. You may want to try it on your early black and white experimentations in this class. You'll find that just a thin layer of color on top of that adds a lot of interest and vibrancy to a painting that's just black and white right now. Okay, good luck.